Я только что,
Кто писал это?
я уже готовый вариант для перевода я передал сегодня Арчу.
Сегодня?
Сейчас передал.
Посылаю.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Frontline Club for what promises to be a really fascinating discussion. Chairing the conversation tonight is Luke Harding, who's the foreign correspondent for The Guardian. So I'll pass you over to Luke now.
Hello, good evening. Great to see a full house for Akhmed and for his wonderful book, memoir, which we'll be talking about this evening. Just a few quick introductions. This is Masha Karp, who will interpret, and this is Kate, who translated this book. As you can see, it's quite a feat of translation because it's not a short book, but it's a brilliant book. Arch Tate, who recently featured in Private Eye, but maybe that's for another time, Arch. And Arch is going to begin with a few slides which set the scene and give some background about Ahmed's life, and then Ahmed is going to talk for about 10 minutes, just...
Maybe 12 minutes.
Well, I just told him 10 maximum, but okay, well...
If you
with your
let me
kind
do it,
permission,
okay?
we'll do 12, and then we'll just chit-chat. And we'll try and leave plenty of time for questions, probably half an hour towards the end. So, Arch.
Can I just ask, has anybody actually managed to buy the book? Could you raise your hand? This is not a surprise. Our admirable publisher has done a very nice job of producing it, but a terrible job of marketing and, in particular, distributing it. It's almost impossible to acquire it anywhere in Europe. You can. This is actually. I'll try not to go on about this too much, but. We have these admirable order forms, which you'll find distributed about the room. And what you can do, I looked this morning online, you can buy it from Waterstones, or you can buy it from Foils online. I mean, they'll order it, you can buy it through them. Alternatively, you can save £8 and order it direct from the distributor in America. And they've given us these discount forms, which are at the back and by the entrance and strategically placed all over the place. And you would need to fill them in and photograph them with your telephones, I suppose people do nowadays, and email it to this bloke in America, and he will send you your book promptly, I'm sure.
Sounds like something that.
It's getting a bit close to it. Anyway, subjugate or exterminate. It covers the first 40 years of Ahmed's extremely eventful and very honorably lived life. And the title is taken from Tsar Nicholas I, who sent a rescript to his viceroy in the Caucasus in 1829. You are now charged, he wrote, with the pacification for all time of the highland peoples, or extermination of the recalcitrant. Akhmed writes, in Russia, tsars, general secretaries and presidents came and went. The political system changed. Autocracy was replaced by Bolshevism, which in turn was replaced by democracy, which we might argue has now been replaced by who knows what. But Russia's basic attitude towards the Chechens, subjugate or exterminate, has never changed. No single generation of Chechens since the end of the 18th century has been left unscathed by Russia's relentless policy. Akhmed was born in 1959, and this photograph of 1969 shows him second from the right with his friend Indi. Indi and I sometimes summoned up the courage to make short trips by tram in Grozny, a special adventure. We had only to start talking Chechen for other passengers who seemed always to be elderly Russian women to rudely interrupt us with an injunction to talk like human beings. As subsequently met not a few decent, educated, well-mannered Russians, but these early impressions are etched in my memory and were the foundation stone of my later certainty that our Chechen and Russian peoples are very different in culture, mentality, and everything else that qualifies as national characteristics. In Voronezh, I completed my diploma as a film and theatre director, and in 1981 returned to the Republic to work at the Checheno-Ingush Drama Theatre. Here Akhmed is acting the role of Hamlet with his friend Hussain Guzuyev in the role of Polonius. In 1985, I was allocated a one-bedroom apartment in the center of Grozny. This was a major and unusual stroke of luck. By this time, I had 2 children. Gorbachev's perestroika was just beginning. In the spirit of the dizzying changes taking place, in 1989, Hussein and I and a number of like-minded friends founded the Daimoch Association. This was, to all intents and purposes, an alternative Ministry of Culture. Later, Akhmed writes, 26th of November, 1994 is a day I will never forget, because it saw the first entry in the death toll of my friends. Hussein Guzuyev's was the first name in that melancholy list. It is time to say a few words about Chechnya's first president, Johar Dudayev. In the Soviet Air Force, he rose by 1989 to the rank of Major General. I met Johar in the early 1990s. I will say only that he was the embodiment of love of his country, and all his ideas, thoughts, and words showed him to be a sincere and uncompromising Chechen patriot. He felt deeply all the calamities, the grief and misfortune which had befallen the Chechens in the past, and had no intention of forgiving our enemies or forgetting our tragic history. Johar told us about the tragedy in Khaibach. With such emotion, it was as if he had been an eyewitness of the atrocity committed by Stalin's butchers, who locked more than 700 women, children, and old people in a stable and burned them alive. There were many similar episodes during the deportation of the Chechens and Ingush. How can we forget that? How can we forgive such things? He exclaimed, with pain and anger in his eyes. The Chechen Republic declared its independence from Russia, as under Soviet law it was legally entitled to do. But in 1994, Russia declared war in order, in the words of its propagandists, to restore constitutional order. Akhmed, recently appointed Chechnya's Minister of Culture, found himself in command of a military front. Dudayev was assassinated in 1996 by Russia, every effort having been made to raze Grozny to the ground. A Russian journalist wrote, "All that is said about the Dudayev regime falls down in the face of the incontrovertible fact that only the mighty national consciousness of a people united by a single will and a common destiny could have withstood the murderous brutality of an aggressor whose reserves of manpower exceed those of Ichkeria by a factor of over 150. And it does not hesitate to commit any crime in its efforts to crush the Chechen people." To counter public revulsion at the barbarity of Russia's war, and as part of his re-election campaign, Yeltsin embarked on negotiations. Akhmed was central to these on the Chechen side. Here he meets Ivan Rybkin, the Secretary of Russia's Security Council, and the Deputy Secretary, who you may recognize, Boris Berezovsky. The presidents of Russia and of Chechnya signed a peace treaty in the Kremlin in 1997. Aslan Maskatov said, "I am profoundly convinced that if we are sincere in our intention to establish a lasting peace between our peoples, there are no contradictions which we cannot resolve at the negotiating table." In effect, however, Yeltsin was signing a peace treaty while preparing for a new war. By the time we realized that, however, it was too late. And so it proved. The Second Russo-Chechen War began in August 1999 and was to last for 10 years. In 2000, Akhmed was wounded and eventually spirited out of Chechnya to become the spokesman in Western Europe for the government of President Aslan Maskatov. Today, he is the Prime Minister of the government in exile of the Chechen Republic. Martin Dewhurst, in his article in the Salisbury Review, writes, "A careful study of the text sheds a good deal of light on the character of Zakaev himself, his bravery, common sense, humanity, and intelligence. A Hamlet who became a man of action because he realized there was and is something very rotten in the state of Russia." Winston Churchill said, "The truth is incontrovertible. Malice may attack it, ignorance may deride it, but in the end, here it is." Thank you.
So, Ahmed, I think you're going to make a comment.
Thank you very much. Good evening, dear friends. First of all, I would like to thank you all for coming on this, for being on this occasion, and I would like also thank the organizers of our meeting at Frontline Club, and all those who were involved in this case. Before I start talking about my book, I would like to thank those who helped me publish this book. First of all is my dear friend, Archtide. Thank you very much. Thank you. A wonderful translator. He not just only translated my text, but also did initial work necessary for this book to be published. Again, thank you very much. Thank you. And I would like to thank also my publisher, Paul Dekenua, president of Academic Press, for his high level work, quality work. I think who bought this book will agree with me, but I'm not sure you have done it because it's as it wasn't sold in London at all. I don't know why. But anyway, this book exists, and I would like to thank again Paul and my dear friend David Sutter, who introduced me to my publisher, and of course Luke Harding, who writer and journalist who wrote a preface to my book and praised my work. Thank you very much. But my special gratitude to you for work you did in covering the case of murder of Alexander Litvinenko. Thank you very much. In your book, Very Expensive Poison. Now about my book. Firstly, how and when the idea arose to publish this book. Since 2004, Alexander Litvinenko and we lived as neighbors, and we talked almost every day. And one morning he came to my place and started to talk me about dream he had is if we as we were at war, back at war, and he, in the brutal battle, and suddenly he heard the rumble of an airplanes. This was Russian aviation. And Sasha described that he was very happy and thought, well, now you Czechs are done. Czechs are what Russians called Chechens that during the First War. And that moment, Sasha realized that now he was on the side of Chechens, and this war and on this war, and those bombs from Russian airplanes were going to be dropped on him as well. And that's when he woke up in horror from this nightmare. At the same morning, we had the idea to write a book together. The main idea was to write the same event from different position. I would write from the Chechen side, he would write from the Russian side, but this idea was not destined to materialize. Unfortunately, Putin got Sasha. And several years after his death, I began to write this book. In the centuries-old history of the confrontation between Russia and Chechnya, there are very few materials written by the Chechens themselves about these events, because all historical documents were deliberately destroyed. And therefore, it was very important for me to describe the events in which I participated and to which I was a witness. When I began to write this book, I was also sure that we should not allow for the future generations to have only one version of recent history, the one written by those who are used to hiding their crimes in a lie. But does not mean that we should be silent about our shortcomings. In this case, what we write will not have any value. I am deeply convinced the instructive experience can be learned only from the truth. And if any point my descriptions of our fallen leaders and commanders seem unpleasant to their relatives, they should understand that I had no intention of criticizing people close to them. I was just trying to give a political assessment of events of a historical scale in which these personalities played a huge role. We, the participants and eyewitnesses of these events, have a duty to our successors to convey to them a true description of the war, not hiding our mistakes and miscalculations, but at the same time not letting the enemy insult the memory of our heroes and massive achievements of our nation. And only in this case can we be sure that new generations of Chechens will not become Mankurts that have lost the traditional values of their nation. And this will guarantee the preservation of the Chechen people and therefore guarantee their victory, because freedom is only needed for people who show high moral values and save the memory of the past. December 11 of last year marks the 25th anniversary of the beginning of the Russian aggression against the Chechen state. At the present time, Chechnya is under Russian occupation, and it's no secret to anyone that over these 25 years, the Russian special services managed to split the Chechen society on a religious basis by dividing the Chechens into good and bad Muslims. And they also managed to split those who stood at the origins of the national liberation movement. That's when doubts began coming to my mind. Maybe all this was in vain, both our struggle and all these sacrifices. Maybe we have not yet taken our place as a nation. But in this moment, I would recall my comrades in arms, with whom I went through many difficult days and trails, and many of whom are no longer alive. Then I began to think that God extended my days precisely so that I can make sure that memory of these people who had given their lives for the freedom of the Chechen people was not finally betrayed. Chechens have had such a fate that the life of each generation is marked by tragedy. From history we see previous centuries were spent by Chechens in war, defending their freedom. But the tragedy of our entire history lies in the fact that each generation of Chechens who survived their tragedy at the end of their lives witnessed a new tragedy caused by the Russian state against our people. So the generation of my parents who survived the deportation to Siberia and Central Asia had to live through two wars in the later years of their lives. And now my generation has to live with the recollection of these wars and pray to God that the liberation of Chechens from the Russian Empire would interrupt this chain of tragedies. I also want to say a few words about the attitude of the international community towards the Chechen tragedy. Abdurrahman of Turkana was a former Soviet dissident and Chechen politician who moved to the Western world in 1943 until his unfortunate days in 1997. By reading his works, you are convinced that the attitude of European politicians towards the long Chechen tragedy has not changed at all during this time, although it would seem that they had the opportunity to carefully study our problem. However, the Western politicians they did not understand the Chechens or 100 or 200 years ago, still do not understand us now. Or maybe they just don't want to understand, because going deep into the tragedy expressing by a whole nation for such long time enforces on people with moral qualities and obligation of sympathy and support. And for many, this requirement is imposed not only by morals, but also by professional on duty. I would like to bring up another shared view, which comes from former Soviet dissident, Russian writer and historian Igor P.B.U.H, who wrote, "By the scale of the persecution, by the methods of genocide, from mass extermination and deportation to despicable discrimination of the entire nation as criminals, the fate of the Chechens can only be compared with the fate of the Jewish of Nazi Germany. But if the Jewish managed to put the matter in the 1,000-year struggle for survival, so that the whole world reacts painfully and sharply to any manifestation of anti-Semitism wherever it comes from, the Chechens have not succeeded to do it so far." It's no secret that leaders of Western countries have always maintained close relations with the despotic regimes that ruled in Russia. And on the Chechen issue, they reached cynicism, labeling the murder of nation as an entire internal affair of the Russian state. Various human rights organizations have reported that in the last 25 years in the Chechen Republic, 250,000 Chechen civilians have been killed by the Russian military and secret services, with more than 40,000 of them children. Dozens of thousands have also been wounded or disabled, and hundreds of thousands of people were left on the streets. 80% of our capital city, Grozny, was destroyed, and dozens of villages were completely destroyed. 26,000 young Chechens were kept in Russian prisons just for their nationality and potential resistance against the Russian military for their own freedom. More than 500,000 Chechens were forced to run and seek political asylum around the world to save their children and families from the violent threat of death from the Russian military. And those who remained are under such oppression and humiliation that people, in order to maintain their honor and dignity, are forced to run from Chechnya. Yes, today in Grozny, civilians are not bombed and mass ethnic cleansings are not carried out in villages. But as a Chechen, I can assure you that is going on in Chechnya today is a spiritual genocide. Putin initially needed Ramzan Kadyrov not only to silence defiant Chechens, but also to create power structures with elements of Eastern despotism. Putin knew that if this experience was successful in Chechnya, where there was never servility and groveling before those in power, then in Russia, where such a conduct before the high authorities was a deeply rooted tradition and where a strong hand was always needed to rule, this experience will find its application without much effort. Putin also calculated that for the past 60 years, Western leaders have supported authoritarian regimes in the East because of economic benefits. That is because these regimes have ensured the uninterrupted flow of energy resources. And Russia, with its enormous resource of energy resources that is supplied to the West and big number of nuclear weapons that it could threaten the West with, Putin knew that it could count on the West support in Chechen issue. We warned the international community that Putin will not stop in the Chechnya. But is that another topic I will not get into? No, now everyone knows who is Mr. Putin. I'm deeply convinced that economic interests of certain countries or political interests of certain politicians should not be more important than fate of entire nation. Chechen nation, in fact, for several centuries, the Russian state has been subjecting the Chechen people to systematic genocide. My friend, this is not only my conclusion. For example, in the year 2000, Parliament Assembly Council of Europe adopted Resolution 1456, which strongly recommended to international community to start an independent investigation of war crimes which Russia committed in the Chechen Republic. But this investigation never happened. In 2004, European Union recognized the deportation of Chechens and Ingush in 1944 to Siberia and Central Asia as an act of genocide, but nothing was done further than that. In order to change the attitude of international community to Chechen problem, I believe it is necessary. I believe it is necessary to convey to the Western public the truth about historical problem of relations between Russia and Chechnya. Therefore, it was very, very important for me that this book was published here in English. And therefore, it was very important to me to speak about it, maybe 12 minutes.
It's
thank
fine.
you very much.
Okay.
Thank you all of who was involved in this case. Arch, Luke, David, Paul, Masha, everybody. Thank you very much. And thank you for your attention. Thank you.
So Ahmed, thank you very much. I mean, I'd just like to say I've read this book a couple of times. First of all, it's very fat, but it's super readable. And it's lyrical in places, it's descriptive, it's poetic. And I think it's unique because it's not one but two wars from your perspective and from the Chechen side. What I like about it, above all, Ahmed, is that you I mean, you said a little bit of this in your speech. You try and be objective. In other words, you criticize Putin and the Russian state, the security services, the tradition of imperialism, but you also acknowledge mistakes on your side, which I think is interesting. And one thing I wanted to ask you about is at one point you were an actor, you were a commander, you were a negotiator, you were a minister, but you also stood to be president of the Chechen Republic of Ichkeria, and you write in your book that was the biggest mistake of your life, trying to become president. What? Perhaps you'd explain, why was that a mistake to want to be president? Because everybody wants to do it these days. Putin, forever Donald Trump again, Boris Johnson wants to be president. I mean, why did you want to be president?
Okay, thank you. Для начала, I will speak on Russia. She is very good translator. I become very good, and I'm used to her.
They will see that.
Маша, я в своем выступлении вот сейчас не говорил о наших ошибках, потому что о наших ошибках Путин говорит уже 20 лет.
In what I've just told you, I was not speaking about our mistakes because Putin has been talking about our mistakes for the last 20 years.
Люк Хардинг дал мне только 10-12 минут, и я не мог потратить это на самокритику.
In the 10-12 minutes that Luke allowed me to speak, I could not really waste this precious time for self-criticism.
Но в этой книге я написал все. И о наших ошибках, и о всем, что было неправильно с нашей стороны, то, что мы не сумели сделать, то, что мы не старались сделать. Обо всем я написал. Я постарался быть очень объективным.
But in this book, I tried to be very objective, and I've written everything, about our mistakes, about the things that we failed to do, about the things that we didn't even try to do. I tried to put in everything there.
А относительно вот ошибки моего участия в выборах, хотя это на самом деле было сделано, это была чисто политическая акция, чтобы наши выборы не рассматривали как безальтернативные.
I took part in this running for president campaign partially from the political reason because I didn't want our elections to be thought of as completely without any alternatives. Just I wanted to be an alternative candidate, but still it was a mistake.
Да, поэтому я думаю, это была ошибка. Почему это была ошибка? Потому что в последующем вот наше участие в этих выборах нескольких кандидатов от сил сопротивления российским спецслужбам удалось развернуть очень мощную антипропаганду, которая была направлена на раскол в чеченском обществе.
But why I think it was a mistake? Because several candidates who, like me, were running for presidency, trying to provide an alternative, it was used by Putin's propaganda precisely with the aim of splitting the Chechen society, of using this campaign against us.
И вот я поневоле, я знал, что я тоже стал инструментом в руках российских спецслужб, направленных против чеченской нации, работы и провокаций.
I felt I was a tool in the hands of the Russian special services who always work against Chechen society and use provocation and other methods against us.
Okay, so that was your attempt to be president. I mean, maybe we'll ask about another of your many roles, which was negotiator. You negotiated throughout the 90s. There's a very memorable description where you fly to Moscow, and you're not sure whether you'll actually come back from negotiations, about whether you might be poisoned as part of the delegation when you're there. You worked with Boris Berezovsky. You met Boris Yeltsin. Just tell us a little bit about those negotiations. What do you hope for? Because you write with some realism. I mean, you know that, for example, the negotiations on the eve of the elections with Boris Yeltsin, that as soon as the election was over, that the war would resume, the fighting would resume.
Yeah. Ну, в политике есть вещи, если даже на данный момент они кажутся очень проигрышными и невыгодными, но все равно на это надо идти, несмотря на большие риски. В данном случае мы рисковали очень многим, когда мы летели в Москву в период Первой войны, после гибели Джохара.
In politics, there are things which, even if they seem at the moment completely a losing battle, and you realize all the risks that are involved, you still feel that you have to do it. And once we were flying to Moscow, after the death, after the killing of Jahar Dudayev, we were running enormous risks.
Естественно, мы просчитывали все возможные варианты, что с нами может произойти.
Naturally, we were trying to calculate what risks we were running and what could happen to us.
Самолет может не долететь, в небе что-то произойти с самолетом.
The plane can fail to reach Moscow. Something in the sky can happen to the plane.
С аэропорта, пока мы ехали до Кремля, могло произойти автомобильная катастрофа.
Between the airport and the Kremlin, as we were driving, an accident, a car accident, was very likely.
Или же после такого, после переговоров, после ужина мы могли быть отравлены. Мы это все абсолютно допускали.
or after the negotiations and after a nice dinner or supper, we felt it would be very easy to poison us.
И, конечно,
we were ready for that.
мы рассчитывали, что Ельцин может полететь и в Чечню, взяв нас в заложники в Москве. Ну, в принципе, так он и сделал.
We actually even thought that there was a possibility that Yeltsin will keep us as hostages in Moscow and then he will go to Chechnya himself. Basically, that's what he did.
На самом деле наш риск был оправдан. Мы рисковали, но он был оправдан. Ельцин использовал этот факт переговоров для внутренней ситуации, потому что он шел на выборы.
We did run a risk, but we thought this risk was justified. Yeltsin used this situation for his internal political gain because he was on the eve of elections.
А для нас это был фактор внешней политики. Мы предстали в этот день как единственная политическая сила со стороны Чечни, которая противостоит России. До тех пор они нас не признавали, но в этот день это признали и они, и весь мир.
For us, it wasn't an internal issue, it was a foreign policy issue. And we came to Moscow as the only force that could represent Chechnya. Before that, they hadn't acknowledged us. They hadn't seen us. But once we were there, they realized that they had to to acknowledge our presence, and they did it, and the whole world did recognize us.
And я думаю, наш паблишер Пол будет очень недоволен, если я обо всем расскажу. Никто и книгу не купит.
I'm afraid that our publisher Paul will be very unhappy if I tell you every detail, because then probably that will stop you from buying the book.
Okay. I mean, well, I want to ask more about the book. I mean, you write very movingly and tragically about war, about what it's like to be in war. You were a commander. You fought. There are grim images from the first Chechen conflict of dogs roaming around the streets of Grozny. You write about teenagers who are 16, 17 who fight and who are killed. And you talk about how Grozny was literally pounded from the sky at the beginning of the Second Chechen War in late 1999 when Vladimir Putin was Prime Minister. I mean, some people here have experienced war and some people haven't, but there was one sentence that struck me that where you write that war has no rhythm. It doesn't take any breaks for Sundays or holidays. It's a continuous thing. Could you tell us a bit about that, about what it's like to be in that situation?
Wow. Я думаю, что люди, которые прошли через войну, как бы кто ни говорил, оно не может не изменить внутренний мир человека полностью, какими бы сильными люди не были бы.
People who fought in wars, whatever they will tell you later, come out of them inevitably scarred, inevitably changed internally. No matter how strong they might have been.
О войне можно читать, военные фильмы можно смотреть и предполагать, что мы понимаем, что это и что происходит с людьми, которые вовлечены. Но я вас уверяю, это не так. Это совершенно другое чувство и другое ощущение, когда ты стоишь, вернее, безысходность и смерть. Впереди ты видишь только смерть и ничего. И в какой-то момент какая-то надежда на жизнь, на будущее, оно появляется и, видимо, оно двигает. Но психологически люди меняются.
You can read about war, you can read books about war, you can watch films about war. You can think that you imagine what's happening to a person when they are there. But this is not like the reality at all. Because when you're there, the main feeling you have is the feeling of hopelessness and death all around you. And it's only sometimes that there is a feeling of hope, and this is probably something that keeps you moving on. But I am absolutely certain that people come out of this experience completely changed.
И почему люди становятся, я могу сказать только в данном нашем случае, почему люди становятся более религиозными?
I can only talk about our own case, but why do people often become much more religious than they had been?
Потому что мы знаем, вот в разных ситуациях человек попадает даже в какую-то экстремальную ситуацию, он проводит несколько дней или недели, 2-3 недели, и человеку необходима реабилитация, да, психологическая реабилитация, и люди проходят эту реабилитацию. А вот представьте себе чеченцы, которые уже на протяжении 25-30 лет находятся в войне, и у них не было ни одной недели реабилитации.
Usually when people get into extreme situations and they stay within these situations for a week or 2 or several weeks, then they then have a period of rehabilitation. They're trying to come back to themselves. And now imagine the Chechens who have been in this extreme situation in the state of war for 25 years or more, and they have not had a week for restoring their strength. They haven't had a week for rehabilitation.
И чеченцы, я знаю, что в основном спаслись именно вот, уйдя в религию. Может, в процессе в последующем кто-то радикализируется, кто-то вообще считает, что нужно вообще попрощаться с этим миром, потому что в этом мире нет справедливости и невозможно достичь. А кто-то находит свой выход именно в том, что он начинает больше общаться с Всевышним. И разницы нет, кто мы знаем, что Всевышний, Он един, да, и мы верим по-разному, может быть, по-разному верим в Него. Но это спасает людей.
I know that lots of Chechens now come to, become believers. Some people can basically think of ending up their lives, or because life is so unjust and cruel. But some people decide to be closer to the Almighty. And we know that there's just one God. We believe in different ways, but there's just one God, and it helps a lot of people to come to terms with their lives.
И относительно вот собак, да, действительно, это для меня необъяснимо. Потому что вот в эпицентре, вот когда шли бомбовые, ракетные обстрелы, артиллерия работала, и собаки, которые оказались в городе, в Грозном, чужие собаки, злые, там, не злые, они начинали льнуть к людям, незнакомым. Они просто прижимались к людям. Собаки прижимались к людям. Они, видимо, вот в людях видели что-то, какое-то свое спасение просто. А в последующем и через неделю, когда я уже обратно шел, эти собаки, в их глазах была ненависть. Если в первом случае была просьба и что-то такое, а уже через неделю в их глазах была ненависть по отношению к людям.
You mentioned these roaming dogs. I remember when under the very heavy bombing and artillery working and everything, these dogs, different dogs of Grozny, were trying to stick closer to the people. The people they didn't know, but they had this feeling that probably they might find some protection, that these people might somehow save them. A week later, when I was in the same place, these dogs were looking at me with hatred. The hour has passed when they were looking for me for protection. Later on, a week later, it was completely different.
И завершая вот эту тему, я считаю, что если человек занимается политикой, и смысл, чтобы заниматься политикой, есть только в одном. Не в тех каких-то, не в карьерном росте, который человек достигает, а в том, если заниматься политикой с тем, чтобы не допустить войны. Нет оправдания и нет объяснения войне. И вот если ты политикой занимаешься, и если ты посвящаешь себя этому, то должен делать так, чтобы не было войны. Вот это мое твердое убеждение.
I think when people go into politics, they often go for different reasons. Something that would give them a quick career, or moving up, or becoming well known. But I think the main aim of going into politics, of somebody being a politician, is to prevent wars. If you are a politician, your main task, your main duty is to try and stop wars.
Okay, the sort of the last sort of third of the book is pretty grim. I mean, there's a brief moment of optimism about 96, 97 when Russian troops withdraw and there's peace, and then you write very well about it, that Chechen politics becomes very factional, and the Islamists become more and more powerful. And one thing that sort of strikes me looking back is that your vision of Chechen politics, I mean, not only did it not win a kind of constitutional, secular Chechnya, the rival factions were, on one hand, Ramzan Kadyrov, the current president of Chechnya, who's got this really Stalinist regime, and on the other hand, extreme Islamists who are fighting against him. What happened to your vision of a kind of moderate, secular Chechnya? Why did it lose out?
Нет, в любом случае, вот эти две крайности, о которых вы говорите, Рамзан Кадыров, который пошел на сотрудничество с оккупационным режимом, вернее, возглавил оккупационный режим, или вот те радикальные исламские группировки, которые пошли на крайние меры и объявили так называемый Кавказский Эмират на всем Северном Кавказе.
To mention these two groups that you have mentioned, the people on Kadyrov's side, Kadyrov, who actually started cooperating with Russia and became head of the occupational regime. Became head of the regime of the became head of the occupiers and their regime, and the other group, the people who went into radical Islamism. So these were the two groups after the war, so to speak, in the late 90s.
Я знаю, что это долгий разговор, но я вас уверяю, что это работа российских спецслужб. Хозяин у этих двух группировок был один. И они были противопоставлены.
We probably will need quite a long conversation to make all the details of it clear. But I can tell you straight away that these two groups were formed and were juxtaposed by one master, by the Russian special services. It was them who organized the Chechens into these two groups.
Бытность Советского Союза, духовные семинары, что мусульманские, что православные, они находились под стопроцентным протекторатом КГБ.
In the Soviet Union, the religious schools, where they were Islamist schools or Orthodox schools, it didn't matter. Both sides, or all of them, were under the control of the KGB.
И вот как российские спецслужбы использовали вот эти два направления. Вот, допустим, те, которые выросли в советский период, их назвали традиционным, последователями традиционного ислама.
So how, what they did in Chechnya, those people who grew up in the Soviet years were labeled the traditionalists, the followers of the traditional Islam.
И второе течение, это в 1988 году в Астрахани был проведен съезд исламского возрождения, и это начало нового, так называемого салафитского движения на территории СССР.
And in 1988, there was a new movement, the so-called Salafit movement, on the territory of the former Soviet Union.
И вот во главе этого движения поставили Ису Умарова. Во главе традиционного ислама стоял Ахмад Кадыров, во главе вот салафитского движения стоял Иса Умаров. Вот они их противопостояли.
The head of this new Salafit movement was Isa Umarov. The head of the traditionalists was Ahmad Kadyrov, the father of Ramzan. So these two people were made to oppose each other.
По нашим абсолютным данным, эти оба человека являлись агентами КГБ.
We have absolutely certain information that both of them were KGB agents.
Тот эксперимент, который они провели в Чечне с провозглашением так называемого Кавказского Эмирата, этот же эксперимент был перенесен в Сирию с провозглашением так называемого Исламского государства. Связи, контакты, доказательства, они есть, и они написаны во второй нашей книге, которая выйдет, иншаллах, я надеюсь.
The Caucasian Emirate, right?
Yeah.
The way they created it, the whole method and organization of it was later repeated in Syria when the Islamic State was created. We have the proofs, the details, the connections, and when my next book will come out, you will read all about it there.
Okay. Just a couple more things before we go to questions. I mean, your book ends with you having a very serious car accident. You're careening around Grozny. You collide just by chance with another vehicle. Then you wake up and your leg is in the wrong position, and you are smuggled out first, I think, to Ingushetia, and then the book ends with you in Tbilisi. So you don't actually make it to London, but. Obviously, here you are in London. You've been here for a long time, 20 years now. You've had the most extraordinary life, which has gone kind of up and down. Did you ever envisage yourself as a young man living in a strange country, Britain, leading being prime minister of a government that actually, I guess, doesn't really exist? I mean, is this a surprise to you, or have you got used to it?
No, I used to it. But it was a surprise for me if somebody told me about it this maybe 30 years ago. I never will believe that. Yes, now I used to it, yeah.
You're used to it?
Yeah.
And
I don't have choice.
No. But just more seriously, I mean, this isn't in this book, but I think it's in your next book. I mean, when you were here, you became close to, well, firstly Boris Berezovsky, whom you met on the other side when he was negotiating for the Russian Federation, and secondly, of course, Alexander Litvinenko, who was also on the other side and I guess came over to your side. Can you tell us a bit about what they were like and how you got to know them and what do you think of them?
Я знаю, что обоим этим моим друзьям я могу назвать, я называю Сашу Александра моим другом, и к нему, и к моему другу Березовскому отношение очень разное. Но я на все, что происходит в моей жизни, смотрю так сквозь призму Чечни и чеченских, и событий, происходивших в Чечне.
I call both of these people my friends. Sasha Litvinenko was, of course, my friend, and Boris was my friend. I know that lots of people have a very controversial attitude to them. But I'm looking at things from my position through the Chechnya events, through what's happening in Chechnya.
Ну, в моей жизни так произошло. В любом случае, я думаю, это в жизни может быть каждого. Мои бывшие друзья стали моими противниками и врагами, а мои бывшие противники и, может, даже враги стали моими близкими друзьями. Так произошло в моей жизни.
In my life, some of my former friends became my enemies, and my opponents, you can even say maybe my enemies, they became my very close friends, or at least people who were on the other side. They became my very close friends. That's how it happened in my life.
В истории противостояния России и Чечни, которая сопряжена очень трагическими событиями, о которых я говорил,
in the story of this Russian-Chechen clashes with lots of very tragic events, which I've mentioned today.
В истории есть один положительный момент в результате всех этих войн. У нас в природе существует договор о мире, подписанный между Россией и Чечней.
There is just one positive thing. The treaty about peace and friendship signed by Russia and Chechnya is in existence.
И этот договор существует, и он состоялся, он был подписан во многом благодаря исключительно Борису Березовскому.
This treaty, this agreement was made and it was signed mainly or in many respects thanks to Boris Berezovsky.
Я уверен в том, что во многом Борису не простили и Путин, и КГБ именно чеченскую тему и чеченский вопрос. И в конечном итоге они его убили.
I'm sure that both the KGB and Putin could not forgive Berezovsky in particular for the Chechen issue. And that is why they ended up killing him.
И вот в противостоянии, в военном противостоянии России и Чечни было очень много случаев, когда чеченцы переходили на сторону России и русских, русские переходили на сторону чеченцев.
In the military engagement of both of Russia and Chechnya, there were quite a few cases when the Chechens changed sides and got to the Russian side, and vice versa, the Russians moved to the Chechen side.
Но это было впервые вот с Александром Литвиненко, когда такого уровня офицер, российский офицер, пусть и бывший, оказался на нашей стороне и стал нашим союзником и соратником. И я абсолютно уверен в том, что во многом именно это явилось причиной того, что Александра убили.
A particular case is the case of Alexander Litvinenko, who was on the other side, and then he came over to us and he became our ally and he cooperated with us. And I think, again, that this was mainly the reason, one of the most important reasons why he was killed.
Но в любом случае для будущего между Россией и Чечней, а я уверен, что оно у нас есть, будущее.
But in any case, for future of Russia, for the future of Russia and Chechnya, and I'm sure that Russia and Chechnya do have a future.
И поэтому уже наравне с отрицательными, с теми негативами, которые есть в нашей истории, у нас теперь есть договор о мире, подписанный между Россией и Чечней. В 2017 году мы провели конференцию с участием российских представителей оппозиции, где подписали меморандум, что в последующем взаимоотношения России и Чечни будут строиться на этой основе.
What is important for the future of Russian-Chechen relations is that apart from all the negative history that we also have this treaty about peace. And when in 2017 we had a conference which involved the representatives of the Russian opposition, we acknowledged that this is the basis, this peace treaty, this is the basis for our future relations.
Это политика, а теперь эмоции. На эмоциональном уровне, чтобы мы имели, помимо Будановых и Шамановых, у нас сегодня есть для положительных и для продолжения взаимопонимания и выстраивания нормальных отношений с Россией, у нас есть Литвиненко, у нас есть Анна Политковская, у нас есть ряд других людей, которые посвятили своей жизни во имя будущего и России, и Чечни. И я считаю, это есть та основа, на котором будут строиться наши нормальные взаимоотношения с Россией, с российским государством и с российским обществом. Иншаллах.
This is politics, but even on the level of emotions, apart from monsters like Budanov and Shamanov, we now have people like Alexander Litvinenko, like Anna Politkovskaya, the people who form the basis of this future relationship and this future peace. And I hope that we'll come to the normal relations and cooperations in future.
Okay, I think that's a very good moment to move on to questions. I just wanted to say one thing, which is that this is the room where Alexander Litvinenko in the autumn of 2006 basically accused Mr. Putin of Anna Politkovskaya's murder very famously before he himself was poisoned. And Marina Litvinenko is in the audience. So I wonder, Marina, might you just say a few words about Akhmed and your friendship with him?
Very good evening, and I would like to say I'm very proud of you, Akhmed.
Oh.
And I'm absolutely sure Sasha would be very proud of you too. And your book, I think it's something what you contributed to his memory as well. I would like to say it was I know this for sure, it was very difficult for you to write this book because it's all your life. And when you're writing a book, you think, was it life for something good? Was it not waste? Not at all. You can see your grandchildren sitting here, your sons, and it's exactly, you did right things. And your wife, Rosa, I would like to mention, she was always with you. She took all these difficult moments, and you must be proud of her too.
Thank you.
We did talk a lot of politics, about war, about peace, but I would like to mention Chechen women and children who still be suffered. And we need to remember, war is not good things. And what Akhmed says, if you decide to be politician, the most things what you have to do, never ever again any war. Never ever again tears of children and women. And thank you very much for this book, and to remind people, Chechnya was the first time to remind is a monster coming to this world. And when we don't pay attention what did happen in Chechnya, we have Georgia, we have Ukraine, we have Syria, and I hope no more. Thank you, Ahmed.
Thank you, Marina. Okay, questions. The gentleman here was first in the middle. Could everyone keep it super short so we can get around and do as many people as we can?
Absolutely. Mr. Zakaev, between August 1996 and August 1999, was there ever a point where you thought both parties could make good on the P.B.U.H Accord and actually settle the legal status of Chechnya before 2001?
Да, да. До 98 года я был уверен, что у нас есть шанс
I was hoping till
продолжить
98
мир.
that we have a chance to carry on with peace.
Но в 98 году, когда это была последняя встреча Масхадова с Ельциным,
But in 1998, when there was this last meeting of Maskhadov and Yeltsin,
Масхадов предложил подписать договор о взаимном признании, вернее, установлении дипломатических отношений.
and Maskhadov suggested signing a treaty about the establishment of diplomatic relations and acknowledging each other, recognizing each other.
Ельцин сказал, что необходимо создать две рабочие группы с двух сторон.
Yeltsin said that it was important to have two working groups on both sides, to have a group.
В принципе, вот группу мы создали. Первая встреча у нас состоялась, этой рабочей группы.
We did create this working group. We had this first meeting.
И дальше это уже не пошло, развитие это не имело, и уже начали работать российские спецслужбы. Все те предыдущие договоренности по компенсациям, по выработке, по зарплатам, по возмещению ущерба, все было заблокировано, ни одна копейка в Чечню не поступала, а сама Чечня была разрушена настолько, что вся инфраструктура была разрушена, и мы были полностью зависимы от внешнего фактора. Россия взяла на себя обязательство компенсировать это, и Примаков тогда, когда был подписан договор о мире, Примаков задали вопрос, а что будет, если какая-то другая страна признает независимость Чечни и установит дипломатические отношения. Примаков сказал, мы с этой страной прервем дипломатические отношения. Один факт. И второй факт. Экономический момент. Единственная страна, мне это важно, которая, минуя вот российские заявления, хотела инвестировать в экономику, чеченскую экономику, это убийство новозеландца и 3 англичан. Это была сотовая связь, которая, там за этим шли какие-то еще другие финансовые ресурсы. Они наказали Англию, и все. На этом уже было понятно, что мы идем к войне.
That was basically all the agreements that we had. They were completely forgotten. Chechnya was devastated. The whole infrastructure was destroyed, and basically, according to the agreements, Russia had taken on itself the obligations to support it, to help it with money and with anything else. Not a single kopeck, not a single coin came to Chechnya, and by 98 it became completely clear that this is not going to happen. A question was asked to Primakov. Кто он был тогда?
Министр иностранных дел.
He was a foreign minister at that point. And they asked him, and what if some other country recognizes Chechnya and will render it some assistance? And Primakov said, well, then we'll break the diplomatic relations with this particular country. So it was obvious that they were not going to have any diplomatic relations. Так, а про новозеландцев и кого убили?
И, да, Великобритания. Просто англичане не послушались Примакова.
Britain did not obey Primakov, and they actually wanted to help Chechnya, but they were punished by the murder of сколько там?
Четверо было, да.
There were four people, I think.
Новозеландец и 3 англичанина.
One person from New Zealand and 3 people from Great Britain were simply murdered. So that was the response, that was Russian response to an attempt to help Chechnya from a side.
Okay, another question. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Zakaev. And Luke, if I might cheekily squeeze in 2 questions, but I'll
Very
speak
quick.
as quick as possible. Sorry, Masha. They're both questions about now. Now, if hypothetically I was Prime Minister of Great Britain with a thumping 80-seat majority, what would you want for Chechnya for me to do? My second question is, how conscious are Chechens in Chechnya aware of the government in exile? You.
Connections.
Нет, значит,
Первый я
да,
понял.
а
First
второе,
of all,
насколько чеченцы в Чечне осознают вас, так сказать, что существует
По первому
правительство.
вопросу. Если он завтра со мной встретится, это было бы больше, чем что-либо он мог бы сделать. Если бы назначил бы встречу и объявил бы этом, что он завтра встречается с премьер-министром.
If tomorrow he will announce a meeting with me and will make it public that he is meeting Prime Minister of Chechnya, that would be a lot.
В следующий день мы услышали бы новости из России, что Путин умер от разрыва сердца.
The next day probably we would hear that Putin died because his heart could not bear it.
По второму вопросу. Чеченцы не отказались от независимости.
On your second question, the Chechens did not give up the idea of independence.
Чеченцы не откажутся от идеи независимости.
And the Chechens will never give up the idea of independence.
Мы жили в этой ситуации более 50 лет. Сейчас мы живем только 20-25 лет.
We lived in this situation for over 50 years, and in this new situation we've only been living for 25 years.
Просто мы не персонифицируем проблему, неважно кто, Закаев, там, кто будет. Главное, мы сохранили правопреемственность нашей власти, начиная с 1991 года. И это важно для чеченцев, которые находятся сегодня дома. Это их право завтра избрать свою власть.
We don't personify the issue. We're not saying, oh, it's important that Zakaev becomes the head of the state. This is not important. What is important is the Chechens today, there, at home, know that they have this legal opportunity to elect their new government who would fight, who would be for the independence. That's the most important thing.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes to run. Any women? Yes, hello. Yeah, hi.
Hi, good evening. Thank you very much, Mr. Zakaev. I was wondering if what your personal opinion is, if Russia's historical attitude, which is very hostile towards Chechnya, is it religiously motivated mostly?
Если в России религиозная мотивировка
No.
враждебного отношения к чеченцам.
Absolutely no. No. It's different. It's just только политика. It's just politics.
Pure politics.
Pure politics.
Yeah.
Is that, sorry for my ignorance, are you the only country around Russia which is a Muslim country, predominantly?
Ну, вы единственная страна, которая в основном мусульманская внутри России, рядом с Россией. Ну, просто извините мое невежество.
Окей. Ну, дело в том, что вот в Советскую империю или в Российскую империю нахождение нас в составе было для России очень важно. Но сегодня уже, когда отошла Грузия, Азербайджан и другие республики, это не принципиальный вопрос. Это чисто сегодня вопрос путинских амбиций. Он не может признать, что это была ошибка и отпустить Чечню.
In the Russian Empire or in the Soviet Empire, it was very important to keep Chechnya within the Russian realm. But today, when Georgia has left, Azerbaijan has left, it's not that important to try and keep Chechnya in. It is mainly the issue of Putin's ambition, and he can't admit that all this war and all this was
После
a mistake.
Путина Чечня будет свободной. У меня нет никаких сомнений.
I have absolutely no doubt that when Putin goes, Chechnya will be free.
Okay, more questions. You've got the mic there. Well, go to the gentleman there, and then we'll move to you next.
A question on your experience during the time of the war. You mentioned that war radicalizes. Did you get the experience that the brutality of the war actually often leads to radicalization? That so many decent people live because they can't deal with that brutality. And by definition, it leaves those at the extreme to remain and fight it. The war that I experienced led to that. And you blame the Russians for bringing the extremists. But I wonder whether there is something more structural about this, where the brutality brings out the filth.
Вы говорите, радикализовать война. Да, но вот сама жестокость, вот он тоже был на войне, и вы обвиняете россиян, но, может быть, здесь есть что-то большее, что любая жестокость людей радикализует.
Безусловно, это и есть вопрос, почему от жестокости, и люди не видят выхода из ситуации, да? Когда обреченность на находиться под постоянным насилием выстраивает обратную реакцию. Это люди...
Yes, you're absolutely right. The brutality and this feeling of being doomed to be always under violent pressure. This naturally gives birth to a reaction to it.
Шахидизм, да, к примеру, по чеченскому вопросу. В период Первой войны для нас вообще было непонятно и незнакомо чувство смертников. У нас не было смертников.
In the first war in Chechnya, we did not have any suicide bombers or people who were ready, who were shahids, basically, who were ready to sacrifice their lives for their idea. We didn't have any.
Они появились уже после путинских операций, да? Расстрел гуманитарного коридора, где были расстреляны дети и женщины.
All these people appeared after Putin's brutality, after the humanitarian corridor where women and children were trying to escape was bombed. This gave birth to these suicide bombers and killers.
Okay, gentleman here.
You seem to think that Putin is the heart of the problem. I would not disagree with this, but I would like to know what, in your view, is the solution in principle, in action, and what do you think the story is going to be?
What do you think the story?
What do you think the story is going to be? How is it going to unfold? How do we get there?
Что будет дальше? Я понимаю, что Путин в сердцевина всех причин, но что вы считаете нужно делать и как это может дальше развиваться?
Ничего не изменится, пока Путин остается у власти.
As long as Putin
ни в самой России, ни вокруг.
Nothing will change either in Russia or around Russia.
Я думаю, в международной политике есть кому позаботиться о том постпутинском периоде.
I think in the international community there will be actors who will look after Russia in post-Putin's period.
А в российско-чеченских отношениях у нас есть договор о мире, который подписан в 1997 году, и русским и чеченцам выгодно вернуться к этому формату и строить дальше взаимоотношения.
In the Russian-Chechen relations we have this peace treaty, which I've mentioned before, and I think it is beneficial for both the Russians and the Chechens to come back to this particular treaty and build their relationship basing them on this treaty.
Okay, so the lady behind, if we can get back. Thank you. And then we might do a couple quick ones after this.
Akhmed Khalidovich, thank you very much for tonight. Thank you for the conversation and for your book. I think it's a wonderful idea that politicians should try and avoid the war at all costs. But how do you feel about when the war is already started? So in the stations in Syria, in Ukraine, what should the politicians in the West, how should they deal with it? Should it only be politics and economic sanctions, or should they engage in military action? Thank you.
They should have will to stop this war. That's end. Absolutely. They should have will. Political will to end this war. And what's going on in Syria, it's not means they try to stop this war.
They provocated war because the different interests of different countries. Если они пожелают остановить войну в Сирии, через полчаса будет найдено политическое решение этой проблемы. Я в этом абсолютно уверен.
If the Western politicians would like to stop the war in Syria, they could do it in 30 minutes. I have no doubt about that.
Okay, I think there are a couple of questions. There's a gentleman right at the back by the door.
Thanks very much. You've described very well the situation, but could you say what the benefits are to Russia from subjugating Chechnya, and what, conversely, the dangers are from having an independent, free Chechen state to Russia?
В чем их выгода от подавления и что? В чем
Значит, что они
опасность?
да, в чем независимости?
В чем опасность,
Абсолютно
если
но.
они-
Нет,
Да.
я поэтому, я хотя это уже сказал, бытность Российской империи, да, для России важно было сохранить Чечню в составе, потому что границы Российской империи шли до Персии и до Турции, да, а сегодня в этом нет абсолютно, это разыгрывается чисто внутренний фактор, внутриполитический фактор. Путин пришел к власти на этой волне, и Путин держится на этом. А после Путина я уверен, что никакой угрозы со стороны чеченцев, если Чечня будет независимым, для России нет. Я уверен, что для России намного выгоднее иметь Чечню независимую, свободную, в союзниках, чем сегодняшнюю лояльную кадыровскую Чечню, которую имеет Путин.
I'm absolutely sure that it is much more beneficial for Russia to have a free, independent Chechnya, the Chechnya that is an ally to Russia, rather than what they have today, this loyal Kadyrov's Chechnya. As I've already said, for the Russian Empire, that was an issue, to have Chechnya within the borders of the empire. But today, it's just Putin's ambition.
Okay, there's a lady here, and then I'm going to probably wrap up, I think, because we're almost out of time.
Hi, hello. Thanks very much for this very interesting conversation. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the current relationship between Chechnya and the other republics in the North Caucasus, and whether there are any, and how they're dealing possibly together also with other autonomous republics in the South Caucasus. Thanks.
Другие республики Северного Кавказа, другие автономные республики, есть ли какие-то между ними отношения, какая между ними вообще динамика?
Okay. Путин разделил Россию на 9 частей.
Putin divided Russia into 9 parts.
8-я часть входит, это 8-й федеральный округ, Северокавказский. Это все республики входят вот в этот 8-й федеральный округ.
The part number 8 is the Northern Caucasus, and all the republics that are there, they belong to this particular section.
Путин денонсировал тот федеративный договор, который был подписан в 1992 году, когда создавалась новая Российская Федерация.
In 1992, when the new Russian Federation was being created, there was a union treaty that was signed.
Все эти республики сегодня лишены возможности избирать своего руководителя.
All these republics going into this North Caucasus borough section, region, are deprived of a chance to elect their own leader.
Они не имеют права обучать свой родной язык.
They can't study their own native language.
Я не говорю уже о религиозных вопросах, которые они лишены права исповедовать ту или иную религию или.
I'm now even not talking about the religious freedoms.
Я думаю, в последующем, когда Россия будет расходиться, вот по этим 9 частям, которые сегодня разделена, Россия, да, вот судьба этих народов, она будет, они будут вместе. Они должны будут создать какое-то конфедеративное или какую-то республику вместе. Именно республики Северного Кавказа.
When Russia comes to disintegrating, maybe according to these nine regions. I think that these republics that form the North Caucasian region, I think they will stick together. They maybe will form a North Caucasian republic.
Вот на сегодняшний день там нет ни в одной республике ни национальной политики, ни соблюдения национальных традиций, обычаев. Все сверху насажено, и расставлены путинские бандиты. Они не избраны этими народностями, они поставлены. Единственное, что связывает эти республики сегодня, вот эти бандитские группировки, которые насадил Путин в этих регионах, и ничего более.
These republics are not allowed to have their own national policies, and each of them has a Putin bandit sent from the center who rules over the territory. And it's them who somehow bring these republics together, because they all are subdued to the people sent from the center.
Just one last very quick question. Akhmed, you haven't been in Chechnya for 20 years since you were in exile. It's quite a long time. I think at one point Mr. Kadyrov offered you a job, but probably it wasn't very sincere. But he tried to bring you back to Chechnya. Do you sincerely think you will see Chechnya again in this life?
Yeah, I hope so. Я живу этим.
That's what I live by.
I live for that.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. This really is a brilliant book.
Thank you very much.
Forms are here. Do buy it. Thank you and here, there, and everywhere. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Akhmed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Masha. Thank you.
Thank you, Masha. Thank you, Ash. Thank you.
Отлично.